All right, part three. So before I get in this one, 1758, Great Britain won 4 key victories in this war. 3 of them were combat victories against the French, and one of them was a diplomatic victory, where they secured peace with the Ohio natives in exchange for a promise to prohibit further colonization of their lands, which was obviously a lie. But they did make that promise and secure peace during the war. When that happened, French soldiers blew up Fort Duquesne, so, they saw that they might be losing and they didn't want the British to have access to their very secure fort. Their allies were gone and they were out of supply lines, so not looking good for France. But the war did continue. So in the southeast, Great Britain was clashing with the Cherokee. So they were also fighting them down there. Great Britain was using violence on them, stealing land, and that caused the Cherokees to side with France. In 1761, Great Britain invaded the Cherokee territory, burned down 15 villages, and forced them to recognize their territorial claims. We also have war continuing in the West Indies and in Asia, which Great Britain does well again. They capture several French islands and won a few battles in India. A little too late, Spain sided with France. So this was in 1762. Spain, in exchange for them siding with France, France promised to give Louisiana to Spain, that Louisiana territory. Spain ended up losing Cuba and Manila to Great Britain once they joined the war. Okay, so the war ends because, largely France is hoping to just keep its other colonies, and they're done worrying about North America. So we have this Treaty of Paris in 1763. So in this treaty, England gained several Caribbean islands from France. They also gained Senegal and West Africa. They gained Florida and all of French North America. Because France had promised Louisiana to Spain, that was now Spain's as part of the treaty. And the reason why England got Florida is that Spain gave Florida to England in order to get their island of Cuba back. So those are all some outcomes there. As far as the native population and what they got out of the war, as you can guess, probably nothing. For them, there's some confusion. So now, all of this land east of the Mississippi River is apparently British. Of course, the native population was not consulted in the treaty here, despite being allies. France, I'm sorry, what am I talking about France for? So the natives could no longer play the different colonial powers off of each other. So it was a better situation for them when England and France were fighting, because that took some of the heat off of them. But now if it's all British, that's their enemy. And the winner, Great Britain, was an not really ideal winner of this war for most native groups, because Great Britain had like 400,000 people, they were more populous, and they were also constantly expanding into native territory. So not ideal that Great Britain won the war for the native groups. The effect on British colonists. So after this war, Great Britain started implementing very heavy taxes in order to pay the debts that they accrued during this war. And guess who had to pay the taxes? Colonists. So that's one thing that really starts making the colonies mad, but also this proclamation of 1763. And so the king said that, all the territory that was newly acquired between the Appalachian Mountains and the Mississippi River, nobody could colonize that area. And, just looking at that, you would understand that that would make these colonists mad because they're land hungry. But it made them even more mad because a lot of the people participating in this war were promised land in that very area. So the land that they've been promised is now worthless because no one's allowed to settle there. Okay, and then French colonists, the people who were living in the colonies that now, don't have France to answer to, many of them were deported. Many of them fled the area. So tens of thousands of people had to move elsewhere. About 3,500 of those moved back to France. and any of them who chose to remain in the British colonies were dispersed. So Great Britain didn't want to have, an enclave with tons of French people in it because they felt that they would rise up in rebellion against Great Britain. And so they forced many of them to move elsewhere, distributed them among the 13 colonies, forced them to assimilate and become more British. Some of these people escaped down to Louisiana and especially the New Orleans area. And that's the beginning of people calling themselves Cajuns, those people who escaped to Louisiana. And here are our universal concepts. These are a few things that we've mentioned in this lecture. So proselytization, which is what the French were doing to their native groups. I mean, that's what all of the European powers were doing to their native groups, but especially this time we're talking about the Hurons and how they resisted. Compromise, the French were really good at, and then war. So those are pretty straightforward. Okay, so I guess I'll see you next week. I'll try and post another announcement, and we'll have more office hours. Feel free to join me in office hours. So far, I've just been sitting around by myself, and it's awfully lonely. Thank you, guys. See you later.